Imagine walking into a hospital, desperate for help, only to be ignored by the very people sworn to save lives. Now picture their stunned faces when they find out you hold the power to end their careers with a single signature. It was an ordinary Tuesday morning when Lily arrived at Riverwood Medical Center, a sprawling hospital tucked away on the outskirts of town. The sun shone brightly through the windows, casting a golden glow across the sterile white walls. Despite the peaceful atmosphere, there was an air of tension, the kind that only a hospital could hold. Nurses hurried down the halls, doctors murmured in their offices, and the scent of antiseptic hung faintly in the air. Lily, a woman in her mid-30s, stood at the hospital entrance, gripping the handle of her worn-out suitcase. Her face, though tired, held an air of quiet dignity. She had the look of someone who had spent years fighting an unseen battle. Today, she was here to confront a new challenge. But she wasn't just any patient. She had a plan. A quiet, almost invisible plan. She had been battling a mysterious illness for weeks now, one that no doctor seemed to understand. Her symptoms were vague: chronic fatigue, unexplained dizziness, and a nagging sense that something was terribly wrong with her body. No one could figure it out, and each new test seemed to lead nowhere. She was tired of feeling like just another nameless face in a hospital room. At the check-in desk, a nurse named Julie smiled at her, but there was something cold in her eyes. "How can I help you today?" Julie asked, her voice friendly but mechanical. "I'm here for a consultation with Dr. Williams," Lily replied, her tone polite but firm. "I was told I could see him today." Julie glanced at the computer screen, tapping a few keys before looking up again. "I'm sorry, but Dr. Williams is fully booked for today. I can schedule you for another appointment next week." Lily's heart sank. Another week? She had waited long enough. "I really need to see him today," she insisted, her voice unwavering. "This illness, it's getting worse." Julie's smile faded. A little, and she sighed, clearly growing frustrated with the request. "I'm afraid there's nothing I can do about that. You'll have to wait your turn like everyone else." Lily paused, feeling the familiar sense of helplessness creeping in. But then, something changed in her. The frustration, the exhaustion, everything that had built up over the past few weeks, spilled over into determination. She had waited long enough for doctors to treat her like a puzzle to be solved. She wasn't just a patient. She had a purpose in this world that was far greater than any of them could see. "You don't understand," Lily said, her voice soft but insistent. "I'm not just anyone. Please, I need to see him now." Julie raised an eyebrow, her patience wearing thin. "Ma'am, I'm doing my best here, but I can't just bend the rules for one person." Lily took a deep breath, her eyes locking with Julie's. "You don't know who I am, do you?" Julie blinked, taken aback by the sudden shift in Lily's demeanor. "What does that have to do with anything?" she asked, clearly baffled. Lily smiled faintly. "Well, let me put it this way. I'm the new head of the medical board." There was a brief silence as Julie stared at her, unsure if she had heard correctly. The words hung in the air like a sudden, unexpected storm. Julie opened her mouth, but nothing came out. She looked at Lily as if she had just transformed into someone else entirely. "Wait. What?" she finally managed to say. Lily's smile remained calm, but there was a new intensity in her eyes. "I said I'm the new head of the medical board. I was appointed just last week. I'm sure you can find my name on the list." Julie, still in shock, quickly glanced back at the computer, typing rapidly as she tried to confirm the claim. The seconds dragged on like hours, the clicking of keys filling the silence. Finally, her fingers stilled. She looked up at Lily, her expression now one of disbelief. I can't believe this. You're really—" Before she could finish, a voice echoed from the hallway. "What's going on here?" Dr. Williams appeared, his white coat swaying gently as he stepped toward the desk. His sharp gaze landed on Lily, then shifted to Julie, who was still standing frozen. Julie stammered. "Doctor, this woman, she says she's the new head of the medical board." Dr. Williams's brow furrowed. He had heard rumors about a new leader coming in, someone with an impressive background, but he hadn't expected to meet her like this. Lily didn't look anything like the powerful figure he had imagined. She seemed so ordinary. But there was something about her that commanded attention. He turned to Lily. "Is this true?" Lily nodded, her demeanor now calm and collected. "Yes, it is. I'm here for a consultation. I've been waiting long enough, don't you think?" Dr. Williams glanced at Julie, then back at Lily. His gaze softened, a flicker of respect crossing his features. "Of course. Right this way." As they walked down the hallway together, the sound of their footsteps echoed in the empty space. Lily's mind raced with thoughts of the hospital's past, of the people who had failed her, of the systems that had ignored her. But now she was in control. She was going to make sure that no one else would have to feel as powerless as she had. The change was coming, whether they were ready for it or not. And as she followed Dr. Williams to his office, a strange feeling settled in her chest. Hope. For the first time in weeks, she felt like maybe, just maybe, everything was about to change. The door to Dr. Williams' office creaked open, and Lily stepped inside, her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and dread. It was a small, unassuming room with a worn desk, a few chairs, and a window that overlooked the hospital parking lot. The sterile scent of antiseptic still lingered, but this room felt ferrent. It felt like it belonged to someone with power, a power that Lily now held. Dr. Williams gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Please, have a seat. We'll get started right away." Lily nodded and sat down, setting her suitcase beside her. She could feel his eyes on her as he moved around the room, gathering her medical file. She could tell he was trying to process everything. A new head of the medical board, a young woman who looked so unassuming. It must have been a shock to him, just as it had been to Julie at the front desk. "Before we begin," Dr. Williams said, his voice tinged with curiosity, "I should tell you that I wasn't briefed on your condition. The administration didn't provide me with any prior information about you. Usually they send over a file with everything I need to know." Lily's eyes met his, and she smiled faintly. "That's because I didn't ask for it. I didn't want to be treated like a regular patient. I wanted you to approach me with fresh eyes, just like you would anyone else." Dr. Williams paused, clearly taken aback. He wasn't used to patients challenging him this way. His gaze softened, and he nodded. "All right, I respect that. So, tell me what's been going on. What symptoms are you experiencing?" Lily took a deep breath, the weight of her journey pressing down on her chest. "I've been feeling incredibly tired for weeks. Not just the kind of tired you get after a long day, but the kind that lingers no matter how much rest I get. I feel dizzy at times, and I've started to lose weight without trying. I don't feel like myself anymore." Dr. Williams scribbled notes in his file, his brow furrowing as he listened intently. "And have you noticed any other symptoms? Nausea? Pain? Difficulty breathing?" "No," Lily replied. "Just the fatigue. It's constant, and it's getting worse." "All right," he said, setting down his pen. "We'll run a few tests and see what we find. But I have to admit, your case is unusual. We're not used to people coming in with a vague set of symptoms and no clear answers. It's like searching for a needle in a haystack." Lily nodded, but didn't respond. She wasn't here to talk about her illness. That part of her life was just a small piece of the puzzle she was trying to solve. She had a bigger mission now, a mission that involved uncovering the truth about this hospital, about the system that had failed her, and about the secrets that lay hidden behind its pristine walls. Dr. Williams stood up, gathering a few papers. "I'll have the tests arranged for you right away. You'll need to stay for a little while, but I promise we'll get to the bottom of this." Lily followed him down the corridor to the lab. As they walked, she couldn't help but notice the subtle shift in the hospital's atmosphere. People moved out of their way when they saw her. Nurses exchanged hushed whispers behind their hands, and the doctors gave her the kind of respectful nods they reserved for VIP patients. It was clear that her status was already making waves, even though no one truly understood why she had come here. As they reached the lab, Lily's mind raced. She knew that her illness, whatever it was only the beginning of something far bigger. She had learned things about this hospital, about its practices, that were too dark to ignore. She had spent years researching and planning, studying the patterns of corruption that had infected Riverwood Medical Center. And now, it was time to uncover the truth. Dr. Williams excused himself, leaving Lily alone in the sterile lab, her thoughts swirling. She could feel the weight of the medical equipment around her, the cold metal instruments that had been used to diagnose and treat countless patients. But today, they would serve a different purpose. As the technician began setting up the tests, Lily's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and checked the screen. It was a message from one of her trusted colleagues, someone who had been with her through the darkest parts of her journey. The message was short but urgent. "We have to talk. It's about the board. There are things you don't know." Lily's heart skipped a beat. She had suspected that there was something off about the way the board had been handling things. But this was confirmation. She quickly typed back, "I'm at the hospital. Come to my office when you can." The technician finished with the tests and left the room, and Lily stood up, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts. She needed to know more about the corruption, about the people who were running this place into the ground. And now, with her new position, she had the power to dig deeper than anyone had before. No one would be able to stop her. Not anymore. As she left the lab and made her way back to her office, she felt a strange sense of unease settling over her. There was a darkness in this place, a darkness that went far beyond her illness. It was hidden in plain sight, masked by the white coats and the sterile cleanliness, and Lily was going to find it. When she reached her office, she found her colleague Sarah waiting for her. Sarah was a seasoned doctor who had been with the hospital for over a decade, but even she had grown disillusioned with the way things were run. Lily closed the door behind them and motioned for Sarah to sit. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice low. Sarah looked around, making sure they were alone. "It's worse than you think," she whispered. "The board has been making deals with pharmaceutical companies, pushing treatments that aren't even proven to work. They've been pocketing money from drug manufacturers, and the patients are the ones who suffer." Lily's stomach churned. She had suspected something like this, but hearing it from Sarah made it real. "How long has this been going on?" "Years," Sarah replied. "It's all about money and influence. They don't care about the patients. They only care about the profits." Lily clenched her fists, her jaw set in determination. This was why she was here. This was why she had fought so hard to get this position. To stop this. She couldn't let the hospital continue to exploit its patients for profit. Not on her watch. She stood up, her eyes blazing with resolve. "We're going to expose them. All of them." Sarah nodded, a flicker of hope in her eyes. "I knew you'd say that." And with that, Lily began her mission. Not just to heal herself, but to heal an entire hospital system that had lost its way. Lily couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. As the new head of the medical board, she had quickly learned that power was a double-edged sword. The hospital staff who once regarded her with respect now eyed her with suspicion. They didn't know who she was or what she intended to do, but they could feel the shift in the air. There was something different about her now, something that would change the course of Riverwood Medical Center forever. She sat in her office late that night, papers scattered across her desk. The evidence was piling up. Emails, financial records, anonymous tips, all pointing to the same disturbing conclusion. The board members had been using their positions to manipulate treatment protocols, pushing ineffective drugs and procedures in exchange for kickbacks from pharmaceutical companies. It was the kind of scandal that could bring down an entire hospital, but Lily knew she couldn't let it slide. Too many lives had been ruined, and too many patients had suffered in silence. Her phone buzzed on the desk, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was a message from Sarah. "They know you're onto them. Be careful." Lily's pulse quickened. She had suspected that the board would eventually catch wind of her investigation, but the warning still sent a chill down her spine. She had to be careful, but there was no turning back now. If she backed down, the corruption would continue, and the hospital would never be the same. The door to her office creaked open, and Dr. Williams walked in, his face unreadable. Lily had been working with him closely over the past few weeks, but she could sense the tension between them. She had tried to approach him as a colleague, not as someone above him, but the truth was hard to ignore. He knew that Lily was no ordinary patient, and that her motives were far more than personal. "What's going on, Dr. Williams?" Lily asked, looking up from her papers. "You look like you've seen a ghost." He hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I've been hearing rumors, whispers in the halls. People are starting to talk about your intentions. And not in a good way." Lily leaned back in her chair, her eyes narrowing. "Let them talk. I'm not here to make friends." Dr. Williams looked uneasy. "You're treading dangerous waters, Lily. The board is powerful. If you push them too hard, they'll fight back, and they'll do anything to protect their interests." "I know," she replied quietly, "but what they're doing is wrong. People are being hurt, and I can't just stand by and let it happen." Dr. Williams sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I agree with you. But I've seen what happens when people challenge the system. People disappear. Careers get ruined. It's not as simple as exposing them. There are consequences." Lily stood up, her eyes steely with determination. "I'm not afraid of consequences. I'm doing this for the patients who don't have a voice, and for the people like you, who are too afraid to speak out." Dr. Williams looked conflicted. He opened his mouth to say something, but the words didn't come. Instead, he turned and left the room, leaving Lily alone with her thoughts. She could feel the weight of the situation bearing down on her. She wasn't just fighting a few corrupt board members anymore. She was fighting an entire system that was built on lies. The next morning, Lily called an emergency meeting of the board. She knew it was time to confront them head-on. The evidence was irrefutable, and she wasn't going to let them wiggle their way out of this. She'd spent too many sleepless nights piecing together the puzzle, and now it was time to bring everything into the light. As the board members filed into the conference room, the atmosphere was thick with tension. They all knew why they were there, but none of them dared to speak. Lily stood at the head of the table, her posture commanding and her expression unwavering. "Thank you for joining me on such short notice," Lily began, her voice steady but strong. "I know that many of you have your doubts about me, but I'm here to tell you the truth. The truth about what's been happening under this roof. The truth about the corruption that's been festering for years." The room was silent. The board members exchanged uneasy glances, but no one spoke. Lily continued. "You've been making deals with pharmaceutical companies, pushing treatments and drugs that you know are harmful to your patients. You've been taking money under the table, lining your pockets at the expense of the people who trust you with their lives. And I've got the evidence to prove it." She slammed the folder of documents down onto the table, the sound echoing through the room. The board members flinched, their faces paling as they looked at the piles of incriminating paperwork. "We have financial records, emails, and testimonies from whistleblowers," Lily said. "There's no way out of this. You've been caught." The room erupted into chaos. The board members began to shout, some trying to deny the accusations, others pleading for forgiveness. But Lily wasn't interested in their excuses. She had no time for apologies. This wasn't about redemption. It was about justice. "Save your breath," she said, cutting them off. "You're all going down for this, and I'll make sure the public knows exactly what you've done." Just as the tension in the room reached its peak, the door opened, and Sarah walked in, a grim expression on her face. She held up a folder, her eyes locking with Lily's. "I've got something you need to see," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. Lily took the folder from her hands and flipped it open, scanning the contents. Her heart stopped as she read through the documents. These were financial records, but they weren't just from the hospital. They were from outside sources, individuals with connections to the board who had been laundering money through shell companies. The scale of the operation was far larger than she had imagined. This is bigger than I thought," Lily murmured. "It's not just about the hospital, it's about everything. The entire healthcare system is corrupted." The room fell silent again, and Lily felt the weight of the truth settle in. There was no easy way out. The path she was walking now would change everything. The board members were done for. But so was she, in a way. She had opened Pandora's box, and once it was open, there was no closing it again. "You've just made the biggest mistake of your lives," Lily said, her voice cold and final. and I will make sure the world knows about it." As she stood there, facing the board, she realized that the road ahead would be long and difficult. The battle was far from over, and the consequences of her actions would rip Lee through every corner of the hospital and beyond. But she was ready. She had fought for this moment, and she wouldn't let fear hold her back.